Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Chicago Bulls Charge. I am Pence, and what I want to talk about today is the Bulls' direction. And this all stems from watching the playoffs, and I was watching three particular games. And those three games were Game 6 of Dallas versus OKC, Game 7 Knicks versus Pacers, and Game 7 of Denver versus Minnesota. And my mind started to wander, and I started to think about the beloved Chicago Bulls. And I was watching, and I was thinking, man, there's maybe three players on this entire roster that could have actually played in these games. And we're talking about the semifinals here. Not even the conference finals, not the NBA finals, but the semifinals of each conference. And if we were talking about the first round, that might expand to like 6 or 7 players. But here's my point. The Bulls roster is loaded with players that aren't difference makers. That even if they are healthy, they're not going to be a legitimate playoff team. Think about it this way. Look down the Eastern Conference standings. Seeds 1 through 7 are as follows: Boston, New York, Milwaukee, Cleveland, Orlando, Indiana, Philadelphia. So going into next season, think about this. Which of those teams are going to drop off so that the Bulls escape the play-in? Almost certainly Boston, New York, and Milwaukee will have regular season success. Orlando and Indiana should be right there and continue ascending. Philadelphia and Joel Embiid should be healthy and be higher than the 7th seed this year. Cleveland, they had a little bit of uncertainty, but they re-signed Donovan Mitchell, and I like Darius Garland, Evan Mobley, and Jared Allen much more than anyone on the current Bulls roster. So we just named 7 teams that are probably a lock for the playoffs in some order and are definitely more talented than the Chicago Bulls. So that leaves the Bulls, at best, in the play-in again. So where do the Bulls go from here? Arturas Karnisovas promised direction and action this offseason, and they found that change. The Bulls fired several from the coaching staff, and they added Wes Unseld Jr. and Dan Craig, both of whom have great experience and impressive resumes, and they could be considered for open jobs around the league. They're on the bench with Billy Donovan right now, and so they're great hires in my opinion. Management seemed to realize several hard truths. First, Lonzo Ball may never be the same player he was, so you can't hope that he fixes everything by returning. That magic they found a few years ago in his first year, it's not coming back. Even if they kept that core intact, it's not coming back. Everybody's gotten older. Everybody's had some injuries. It's not coming back. And that leads us to the second hard truth. That DeMar DeRozan is 34. And eventually that needle is going to be pointing the other direction in his career. And that's why they didn't offer him the extension. That's why they never come to an agreement. Third is Zach LaVine is going to be 30 soon. And he has several injuries in his history. And NBA history suggests that he could be looking at an alarming transition, and the Bulls can't rely on him as a guy if they want to be successful. And the last hard truth is that Nikola Vucevic doesn't look like a productive starting center anymore. These are hard truths, but reality is reality. The Bulls have no incentive, none, to be good next year. As I said already, the top 7 is almost a virtual lock in some order. And the Bulls have little chance of breaking into that unless they make a surprising move and land the superstars somehow. They also owe the Spurs their first-round pick next year unless they finish in the top 10 of the 2025 draft order. And many analysts predicted the 2024 draft is one of the worst ever, but the 2025 is one of the deepest. And so the Bulls need picks in the 2025 draft, particularly at the top. So look back through NBA history. Go on Basketball Reference, StatHead, whatever, Google it. Go back and look at franchises to at least 1980. You can go back further than that if you want to. And look at how these teams acquired their franchise stars. Look at how these NBA champions and some of the top-tier teams acquired their franchise stars. More often than not, you're going to find it's through the draft. And there are some exciting prospects at the top of the 2025 draft, including the impressive Cooper Flagg. The Bulls need to be in position to draft one of these potential franchise changers in 2025. And to do that, means they got to move on from the old. They didn't offer DeRozan an extension, or didn't come to an agreement on extension, and signed and traded him, and they shouldn't have, re-signed him. They've been aggressively shopping Zach LaVine, but no one wants him. They've held on to him too long, and they don't want that albatross of a contract either. And so that may lead to them possibly being content taking less than what they think he's worth to dump that salary. And they have to have a timeline for moving on from Vucevic. If you look around the league, the center market starts to dry up pretty quickly. And for all of his faults, Vucevic does provide stability. He does provide size, and he provides some offense and could be a valuable contributor for some contender off the bench. And honestly, for the Bulls, they don't need to be in a hurry. I'm not sure if Vucevic's presence changes the win totals for the Bulls, so he might net more at the trade deadline for a team looking to add that missing piece than he would during the offseason. And his contract is bad, but it's not an albatross like LaVine's, so they should be able to move him. And I've said this for a while, but arguably the Bulls' most valuable asset was Alex Caruso. And they landed the controversial Josh Giddey, who's 21 years old. He's shown flashes of being something in the NBA. And I know there's off-court stuff, and nothing was substantiated, and there's that, but we're not talking about that today. But basketball-wise, OKC became disenchanted with him in the playoffs and seemed to think he'd be a better fit off the bench, which reportedly he was reluctant to do. So given all these circumstances, on-court, off-court, it seems if OKC wanted Alex Caruso specifically, the Bulls should have had the leverage, right? Well, they did a straight-up swap. A straight-up swap. The Bulls had the leverage and they didn't get anything else. They didn't get a conditional pick in OKC's mass war chest of draft picks for a guy that a lot of teams around the league would love to have. That just blew my mind. I can't help it. I'm glad that we got Josh Giddey. I'm not disappointed at all. It's a great gamble, but I can't help but think about that trade and think they should have gotten more. What was OKC going to do? They're in contention right now. They're close to contending for a championship. They needed that missing piece, and they were going to upgrade that Josh Giddey spot. Well, who around the league were they going to get that was going to improve them realistically? Who would they pivot to? Realistically, the Bulls had all the leverage, and they didn't capitalize on it. The Bulls did have a good draft and a good summer league. The Bulls landed Matas Bucelas in the draft at number 11. He's a kid with Chicago roots. He had a decent summer league. He had some impressive moments, and you can see the raw potential that's there. But he's going to need a lot of work. He's got to work on that jump shot. There's some. He's going to get used to the speed of the game. But I am encouraged by what I saw from him. I did walk away from summer league encouraged by the progress of Julian Phillips. It looks like he can hit a few threes now and still has that awesome athleticism. To me, he's starting to look like a poor man Serge Ibaka, and that's a good thing. But I was also impressed with Adama Sanogo. He wasn't outstanding. You didn't see a lot of post work from him, but he did a lot of cleanup work around the rim. Getting rebounds, putting them back in. And he influenced games with his size a little bit. I know he's a little short for a center, but he did influence the game with his size in the paint. I'd like to see him get opportunities on the court for the Chicago Bulls, not the Windy City Bulls this season, and just see what we have in him. And, maybe that's what the 2024-2025 season is. Let's just see what these young guys have. If they want to be relevant at any point this decade, they have to avoid overvaluing our assets and be open to changing anything and everything about this team. This team is currently going nowhere, and hopefully ownership and management are aware of that and stop trying to play for the playoffs, and they continue to act accordingly. The whole purpose of this season should be player development and putting themselves in draft position to land Cooper Flag. Period. I think that's the Bulls' biggest obstacle since Derrick Rose got injured and since they stupidly decided to part with Jimmy Butler. They've not been able to find their true franchise player. They kept saying with Zach LaVine. They said he was the franchise cornerstone. It's the phrase that Casey Johnson used to use all the time. And it was clear before they even traded for him that he just wasn't that guy. He was a nice scorer. I wouldn't even say a great scorer. I think his career high in points per game was 25. I wouldn't say he's a great scorer. I think he's a really good scorer, and I think he's a valuable offensive player. But he wasn't a franchise player. He never was going to be a franchise player. And if the Bulls want to regain their relevance, they have to find their franchise star and build around him. There's a lot of nice talent on this roster. I like Kobe. I think he had a great year last year. I really like Ayo Dosunmu. I think he's a terrific player. I never quite understood the hate for him that he was getting. Phillips could be something. Dalen Terry has actually exceeded anything I ever thought he was capable of. I was not a fan of him, and I thought he was actually pretty good at times last year, and I think he's going to be solid going forward. And as I said, Josh Giddey, he could be something. But we still need the centerpiece. So everything the Bulls do now should be focused on finding that centerpiece. Until then, we're not going to be relevant in the East or in the NBA. And that's it, folks. That's all I got for you today. So thank you for watching. We'll be back soon with more from the Chicago Bulls chart. And until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks. Have a great one.